The following is brought to you by VerticalVet. Rethink your GPO.
Hi, once again, welcome to one of the Real Talk series from VerticalVet. I am Dr. Ernie Ward, Executive Director of Education for VerticalVet, and it's my pleasure to greet you once again. Hope you guys are staying safe and doing well, and tonight we're going to talk about one of those areas in practice that needs to be talked more about, and that is the business of pet nutrition. This is one of those areas that people like me and our special guest tonight have been talking about for quite some time. We believe strongly in nutrition as part of the foundation of any veterinary practice. And tonight we're going to have a discussion around why this is important for your business bottom line. And I am so happy to be joined with a dear friend of mine and really one of the foremost experts in the area of practice management and profitability, Fritz Wood. He is a CPA, a certified financial planner. Most of you know him because you've seen him lecture at any of a number of events around the globe. Fritz has certainly been an impact both in my personal and professional life. I've known him for quite some time, and I will say this to you, the VerticalVet family. Listen to people like Fritz. They're really trying to help us achieve levels of success that we just can't achieve on our own. And so his unique perspective and experience tonight is going to help us better understand pet food and nutrition and how it can actually help your practice thrive. So Fritz, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I appreciate that warm introduction, Dr. Ward. Thank you very much. And I've had the pleasure of knowing you and admiring your work for a long time. So thank you for all you've done for me and your profession also. And I'm honored to be here and excited to talk about nutrition. You know, I've been passionate about pet nutrition for a long time. Largely, there's a whole bunch of things to like about it, right? I mean, it's 100% prevalent. They all have to eat. They all have that in common. It's not seasonal. A lot of things that happen in a veterinary clinic tend to be seasonal. Pet food's not seasonal. I have, and I'm sure you have also, and in fact, we'll talk about this, some of the research that you've actually done yourself through the obesity initiative. Every survey I've ever seen says the number one thing pet owners want to know from their veterinarian is, what do I feed my pet? So if for no other reason, this needs to be top of mind because it's top of mind with your clients. And so that's, you know, sort of number one, 2 and 3. Number 4, and I think one thing veterinarians really need to appreciate is there are a lot more dollars spent every year on pet food than there is on veterinary care. And, you know, that shouldn't be a revelation. I hope to spend more money on food this year than I do on medical care also, you know, right. I mean, But the fact is, pets eat every day. So they're already spending that money on something, and perhaps, you know, it's not a product that you'd endorse yourself. Perhaps not the plane of nutrition that you'd recommend. And so we know veterinarians, and also and you know, again, I know you have firsthand knowledge with this. When pet owners are asked, "Are you getting that advice from the veterinarian?" the answer tends to be no. I didn't. And particularly that's true with what we call the wellness diets or the maintenance diets. So and a question I always ask, you know, and I've had sort of unanimity in the answer is, you know, I would ask everyone listening to this, you know, in your heart of hearts or in your mind, do you believe what a pet eats has anything at all to do with its health and longevity? And I think if, you know, my understanding is everyone tells me yes. I'm not trained like you. I'm not a scientist. But everyone, and I know that, I think we all know that intuitively, right? I mean, what we, of course, impacts our health and longevity. And so here it is, you know, one of these big factors in terms of health and longevity. Clients want to know about it. You know, it's more dollars spent in that category than the veterinary category, but we've sort of shied away from it over the last our careers. I mean, it's, I guess, job security for people like you and me, but we have not done a very good job. In other words, if you look at where pet food's sold, you know, a real small minority gets sold through veterinary clinics, and that doesn't need to be the case. We're going to talk in this section, I'm sure, about e-commerce and about home delivery and auto ship and doing business the way the modern pet owner would want us to do business, and being easy to do business with, and all the benefits that accrue to the pet owner, and to the practice, you know, as a result of doing that. And veterinarians should be participating in this revenue stream, this biggest revenue stream that comes from pets, and that's the pet food category.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and you're right. We have seen a sea change. I mean, if we go back to when I began practice about 30 years ago, there was a lot of pet food sold directly through veterinary clinics. And of course, today it's just low single digits. And the other thing too, Fritz, that you and I have witnessed during our career trajectories is the abandonment of some of the basic foundations of pet care. So we're talking about nutrition, which I want to discuss that further with you, but we're talking about behavior, right? I mean, that's like the second biggest question that pet owners have is like, hey, my dog is jumping up or barking or doing whatever, right? My cat is scratching the furniture. It's a behavior question. And we often are just sort of left going, well, you need to see somebody on TV about that or whatever, And then the third thing that we've sort of abandoned, in my opinion, would be online pharmacy sales, or we've lost to pharmacy sales to online pharmacies. I mean, these are the things that in my tenure as a veterinarian, I've just seen sort of evaporate, right? I mean, you've seen that as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think my introduction to the profession came through, Hill's Pet Nutrition when I was working at Anderson Consulting back in the 90s and early 90s. And that was the result of PetSmart coming to town, if you remember at the time, and that was a threat to veterinarians, right? Because you're right, veterinarians were selling a lot of wellness. They were selling a lot of science diet at that time. And look, I think veterinarians need to be in the wellness business now too, right? I mean, you and I have talked about this. There's a lot more candidates over the course of a pet's lifetime. A lot more of those years are going to be sort of the maintenance years. And I think veterinarians, when they think pet food, think therapeutic diets, sick pet. And I think they need to think a lot more broadly. I mean, these people, the first thing they think about when they have a pet is, what do I need to feed? And every survey I've also seen says, the veterinarian still has a lot of credibility and carries a lot of weight, and her recommendation is going to go a long way.
And I want to touch on that. So, but before we get into that aspect of what the pet parents want and deserve, let's talk about the biggest barrier to pet food sales by veterinarians. And I will have to argue that it is our attitudes towards selling pet foods. And there I've said that word, Fritz, that so many veterinarians get offended by, selling, right? And I fear that the reason we've abandoned pet nutrition largely in the veterinary channel is because vets say, you know what, I'm going to be perceived as a salesperson and I'm a doctor. Can you speak to that? Give some advice to that young veterinarian out there who's struggling with that aspect, and they kind of would like to make some recommendations about maintenance diets, therapeutic diets, whatever it may be, but they fear that if I do this, somehow it will taint the white coat. I used to say, this dirties up their scrubs, right? And I don't believe these conversations do. So maybe speak to that person.
Well, I think, that you got to look at it from the pet owner's perspective, right? I mean, they're what they want is to do right by their pet, and they want to be a responsible pet owner, and particularly in the eyes of, the veterinarian. And I don't think, I'd go back to that very first question. If you believe as a trained veterinarian, as a scientist, that what a pet eats impacts its health and longevity, then I think you have an obligation to have an opinion. And if pet owners are coming to you and that's the number one thing they want to know, then I think you're obligated to have an opinion. I think if it's the biggest area where dollars are spent, you should probably be obliged to have an opinion. And I don't think most veterinarians look at NSAIDs that way, or heartworm prevention that way, or flea control that way. But there's something about nutrition, and they've been a little bit afraid to fully embrace it and have an opinion and passion, conviction. And look, I've said this before. I think, I'm an avid subscriber to Pet Food Industry Magazine, right? I mean, what do they tell us every year? There's 348 dog food choices if you're a U.S. consumer. 290 some cat food. So a lot of choices out there, right? Some of them are called premium. What makes them premium? Well, generally that they're in the maybe top quartile of cost, for example. And veterinarians always got away all those years with just saying, oh, any of the premium brands are fine. And so Google, I challenge you, Google premium pet food and see if you end up with fewer than 10 million hits. That doesn't really narrow it down. So people are coming to you, they want you to have an opinion and to not have one. I mean, share with them what you feed your pet, at a minimum. I mean, obviously you wouldn't be feeding them something you didn't think was healthy. So, I think
those old buttons, I think I've heard you talk about, I think Hills back in the day, asked me what I feed my pet type stuff.
Ask me what I feed. Just because here's the deal. You want to make something important to a veterinarian, have the client ask them about it, right? I mean, because veterinarians always tell me the same thing. It's what you said. They don't want to be a salesman. And I think this move to e-commerce changes everything. I think that takes the veterinarian out of the equation of being a salesperson entirely, even feeling like one. Because first you have to recognize this client is already buying food, and maybe the wrong kind of food. This is a little off topic, but I would, if you want a math assignment, look at the top 10 selling pet foods in the United States and look at the cost at the local supermarket of those, and on a cost per day basis, and compare that to the cost per day to feed a hospital quality maintenance diet. And you'll find very quickly you can save the average cat owner maybe $500 a year by shifting to a much greater nutritional plane, for example. Dogs, maybe not so much, other than the small ones that are eating the canned food. But they're already, so in some cases, what I'm telling you is you could actually save them a bunch of money and switch them to better nutrition. In other cases, maybe it's a push. In other cases, maybe it's a dime more a day. I mean, we're talking, you gotta recognize, A, they're buying it anyway. B, they're getting it home delivered anyway. They're on auto ship anyway. So it's like, either Chewy can have all that, right, or PetSmart, or you can have a piece of that because you have an opinion. And no more labor. You don't have to hire anybody. You don't have to. Nobody has to work overtime. You don't need an IT specialist. Okay.
That's important. But getting back to the psychology thing, because I think this, again, you've made a really important point, and I'll be honest with you, Fritz, I haven't considered it. And that is that as we increase the distance between actually physically carrying the bag out to the car, as I've espoused for all those years, that does diminish the salesy aspect. I actually think that is something to lean into. And this is why we're seeing Hills at Home and other subscription type services. I think it's going to benefit us in ways that we really don't appreciate yet. So again, veterinary colleagues out there, you've got to get beyond thinking of yourselves as a salesperson just because you're recommending the thing that they do every day, which is eat. So nutrition is the foundation of good health. So I think, again, we have to transcend that discussion. But Fritz, you also started leaning into this other aspect about cost, because, I think there's also been a misperception among veterinary colleagues, managers, owners, that somehow our diets can't be price competitive. And yet here you go, look, everybody's buying premium pet foods these days. And have you looked at how much they are? I mean, often we are in alignment with the costs out there, the broader market. Am I right?
You are. Yeah, absolutely. And so if you look at what are the top selling brands on the pet foods, and by the way, all these things, seem to begin with pet food. I mean, Chewy, for example, is very active in the pharmacy space, but it began, as a home delivery pet food company. And I'll take that one step further and say most veterinary clinics that I've worked with, who have, or witnessed, who have over a period of time embraced this notion of online pharmacy and home delivery, very often they first began with food, which makes a lot of sense for a whole bunch of reasons. It's taken up a lot of square footage. So for those people who are, in most clinics at some level are, resource constrained physically, and you can't possibly carry every SKU, of any one company, let alone, a competing company. So it's nonsensical that it makes perfect sense that you'd begin with food and it's heavy. What you mentioned, though, I'll just throw out one little other tidbit that's germane here to this notion of separating ourselves from the sale a little bit. When you embrace things like Hills to Home, or you embrace things like the home delivery of foods through like a vet source, one of the greatest things that happen that nobody really focuses on, but you do later when you figure it out, is you reduce greatly the size of the veterinary invoice. If you just, right. I would challenge people to think of an annual client visit for a well pet, middle-aged. I mean, and of course there's a physical exam, and of course there's a 40X test or whatever, and there's vaccines at this level, and a fecal test, but you know what? I'm going to spend a whole lot more probably if I go home with a year's supply of flea control and heartworm preventive and grab a bag of food. Well, take the flea control and the food off, and the heartworm preventive, and suddenly the veterinary invoice looks very small. And
And, and,
so,
and Fritz, that's an important point because, there's this concept in psychology of the individual spend. So meaning that when people go to a auto, mechanic place, right, they expect it to cost a certain amount of money. And it's going to be $500 to fix the air conditioner, right? And so as long as you're within that boundary of $500, the consumer feels like they got a good value in most cases, as long as the air conditioner worked. Same thing when they go to the vet clinic, right? I mean, it's for their annual exam. I'm going to spend $150 today, right? Well, if you layer an $80 bag of food on top of that, guess what? You just diminished the veterinary services portion of that by half. So I think this is really, again, one of those huge things that you don't think of initially of why we should be going to a subscription model for these things, especially, monthly preventives and food, because it does create more distance. And psychologically, this only benefits the consumer relationship because now they have, quote unquote, more money to spend on veterinary services, which is ultimately what they really should be doing anyway. So.
Yeah, well, and what happens over a period of time is, I'm thinking of a clinic in, Boston metro sort of, and, not so long ago, 70% of their revenues came from services and 30% of the revenues came from product sales. And I would characterize that as sort of a perfectly normal distribution. Well, fast forward 5 years, they embrace the online pharmacy. This is not an overnight quick fix, but over a period of time, people do it for the same reason they go to Chewy, right? I mean, it's the store's always open. They get what the product they want, relatively few clicks. They can enroll in auto ship. The product arrives, what they're doing is today's consumer is permanently removing an item from their to-do or errand list, and that's a little over 70% of people who do business on Chewy do it on auto ship. So, you can't ignore tens of millions of pet owners who are telling you exactly what they prefer. And that is, the store never closes. It's an easy buying experience. I can find what I want. It's going to show up in a day or two, maybe 3 at the outside. It's a fair price.
And
I think these are all non-negotiables.
They are. And I'll tell you one other secret that we need to really make sure the veterinary profession understands is the churn in these subscriptions is very low. So when you start looking at these reports that Chewy gives out, they are publicly traded companies. They have to give these reports quarterly. They talk about their churn. These are the number of subscribers that stop subscribing for whatever reason. These are in the low digits, maybe like, 10, 15% at most. So that means that month on month, they are not only retaining the large base of subscribers, but they're compounding it. That means they're growing. Yeah. And so this is why you and I love things like pet nutrition, because we know that it's one of those areas, as I used to say, this is a compound area in your clinic. If you want to compound your revenues, you start as many dogs and cats on whatever foods you can sell or want to sell as early as possible, because over the course of their lifetime, it's tremendous return. I mean, I think this is the one conversation around food that will yield you more than almost anything else. I mean, heartworm preventives are going to be right there, but honestly, we will spend twice as long talking about spay or neuter than we do on nutrition, and that spay or neuter is that $100 once and done, and it drives me crazy sometimes.
Well, I mean, we're just scratching the surface. I mean, the opportunity available in the nutrition category, I think, is, it's nothing short of astounding. And so, but we have to do business how people want to do business. And what they don't want to do now is make a special purpose errand to drive by a veterinary clinic, struggle to find a parking spot to go in to find that they don't have the product or they just sold the last unit of what you needed. So it's
the only reason it worked back in the day was because they didn't have any choices, right? Accessibility has changed everything. I mean, I live in a very small, my town's about 400 people here on the coast of North Carolina. Love it, but I don't have any big stores. The closest Walmart's going to be 20, 25 minutes away, but yet I can go to my computer and order anything from around the world. That's the accessibility element that people don't appreciate. And here's the other thing, Fritz. What I love you said back in the day, look, we had to sort of throw in and became tribalistic when it came to food brands, right? Because we can only really carry one brand in our clinics. Maybe a couple, but we didn't have the space to stack, bags on tops of bags. And we had a big clinic that we built really with selling food in mind. But today you can offer a wealth of choices. I mean, it's limitless, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you hit on one of some of the objections that you and I were always struggling to overcome in the nutrition category are just perfectly obsolete today. So one of them is I don't have space, right? Well, guess what? There is nothing you cannot carry, right? I mean, so unlimited there's nothing you
Yeah.
can't sell, frankly. So that's no longer, or people run their errands and they do their shopping on the weekend and I'm not open on, well, now you are, your store never closes. Or, boy, my people spend a lot of time shuffling this stuff and, back injuries and workers' comp claims because the stuff's heavy and schlepping it out to people's cars. All that's gone. People worried about, well, we don't really keep that close a track of our inventory and maybe some of it shrinks out the back end of the clinic. Guess what? All that stuff's gone. Because I've seen clinics that sell hundreds of thousands of dollars, north of $500,000 of pet food a year, and carry sample size bags in the clinic to tide them over until the UPS truck shows up 3 days or 2 days from now. I mean, that's how business is done today. You don't. You got to be easy. I think this is non-negotiable. I mean, you must be easy to do business with, or you're going to lose potentially the lifetime value of a customer. That's crazy.
And that's what I want to talk about. So there's an old figure you've been throwing around for a while, and it's a pretty standard figure. And honestly, it's backed up by years and years and years of proof. But, average vet, small animal veterinarian, in a clinic in anywhere USA, if he sold pet food to all of the dogs and cats, that poundage is impressive and important. Could you kind of review that? I mean, I've heard you speak on this many times.
Well, I mean, I think it's always a great risk, to start throwing numbers around, but it is pretty astounding. I mean, the round numbers are that the scientists tell us that dogs and the cats eat about 6 times their body weight a year. Okay, so 30-pound dog is going to eat about 180 pounds of food a year, and a 10-pound cat around 60 pounds of food. And so when you throw out the big numbers, you say, okay, well, the average veterinarian in the U.S. sees 1,200 dogs and about 700 cats, and all of a sudden you're talking about 330,000 pounds of food every year per doctor. Okay, so take 330,000 pounds times the number of doctors in your clinic. That's how much food's required to be consumed just to perpetuate life, right? And again, I would submit to you, they're buying it somewhere today. They're probably buying a premium brand. There's about 3 times as many people feed a premium brand today as a value brand. So that's another thing. It's changed, Dr. Ward. I mean, 30 years ago, the old Roys of the world were, that's what some people did. Well, that's increasingly rare. I mean, most people, just like we have in human nutrition, recognize that what we eat is pretty important to how we feel and how we conduct ourselves and how productive we are. And
they
assume the same thing.
They leveled it up. They got smart.
Yeah. Well, it's and we see the others like Chewy coming up with the private labels and many of the others. So yeah, I think, the level of nutrition, seriously, better than it once was. There's no question about that. And I think, companies like Hills have been at the forefront of that. But the lesser brands are not fed as often as the premium brands. I mean, that's what people are feeding now. So, back to this notion of feeling like a salesperson, it's like, no, people want you to have an opinion. If you don't give them an opinion, you're not meeting their expectations. You're falling short of their expectations. There's 400 brands of food. Can you be an expert in all of them? Absolutely not. Can you be an expert in 1 or 2? I believe you could. Maybe it's what you're feeding your own pet, but
get back to that figure, because I mean, again, if you just look at the basic math, each vet is going to be responsible for 300 to 350,000 pounds of food, right? I mean, we know these are rough numbers, but they kind of bear out over time. And certainly you and I have seen this in real life. So now, the old profit used to be, well, $1 a pound. Even if you cut that in half, which is really strong reduction, still each veterinarian could potentially be bringing in $150,000, $200,000 easily just in pet food profit. I mean, am I missing the math here, or is the profession missing the math?
No, that potential exists. I mean, I think we've always just kind of to think of 100%, or even half,
Right.
is even crazy. I mean, today we're at about 3%, right? So the upside is enormous. It's incalculable.
Right.
And we've talked about this before, but this is beautiful in the sense that I don't need to buy a new piece of equipment. I don't have to hire additional employees. I don't have to pay overtime. We don't need to build a new building. I mean, this is the ultimate low-hanging fruit. These are your existing clients with existing patients that today are seeking your advice. And again, all we're doing is saying, look, you're the professional. We know you're credible. People want you to have an opinion. So go ahead and insert yourself into this revenue stream the same way people like Chewy have, by being easy to do business with. Here's the deal. Here's a way, Ernie, and salespeople would probably adamantly disagree with this. But look, I hate sales too. I mean, I would break out in hives with the thought of selling. And so I've tried to put myself in a veterinarian's position and said, how would I do what they do? And I think the best thing, what I've decided is, I'm going to separate myself from the sale, whether it's nutrition or flea control or heartworm preventive. I'm going to say, look, here's the non-negotiable part of it. Here's what I think your pet needs to be eating. Now, the negotiable part, or here's the non-negotiable part. Your pet needs to have this, beefy chewable every 30 days, no matter what. And now the negotiable part's where you buy it.
Right.
And I would just say our clients find it pretty convenient to have it delivered to their home on a regular schedule, auto shipped, and our prices are competitive with Chewy. And look them dead in the eye and just say, and the cherry on top to me is this allows us to have complete medical records. We're better doctors if we have visibility to the products our clients buy for their pets. And every part of that's 100% true. It's 100% transparent, which is what people want today. So just lay it out there. I mean, is this causing the client to pay extra? No. Is it inconvenience them in any way? Absolutely not. Does it make you a better doctor if you have visibility to these purchases? I would say, yeah.
And
well,
Fritz,
the thing closest to your heart, obesity. We need to talk about that.
Well, we will, but let's set that up, because see, here's where I think a lot of veterinary professionals miss the boat. That they say, you know what, I'm going to avoid discussing nutrition from maybe early adulthood. So maybe they talk about puppy food, right? But then transition to the premium adult food that you like. And then they say, I'm not going to talk about nutrition again until there is need for a medical intervention. And I think that you lose credibility when you stop that conversation, because see, now what you're basically saying is that you guys go feed whatever you want to feed. I'm agnostic, right? Just feed a food. I don't want to get into it. You're going to argue with me over my pet food recommendation. But then suddenly the dog gets kidney disease, or the cat gets diabetes or arthritis or whatever, and you say, wow, we need a therapeutic intervention nutritionally here. I think you've risked failing the client. I think they're going to be like, really? So now you want to sell me some dog food? Where were you all these years when I was actually wanting a recommendation? I needed your advice. I've been going to Chewy's. I've been going to Petco, PetSmart, whatever. They've been helping me out. So you know what, doctor, before I take your recommendation, let me ring up Chewy's. I mean, Fritz, that is the big danger, I think, when we abandon maintenance diets and think, well, I'm only going to talk about therapeutics. I think we risk that relationship. We don't build the bond and trust that we need for them to then take us up on a therapeutic diet. I mean, does that make sense to you as well?
Yeah. I mean, it seems odd that you wouldn't have had an opinion.
Right.
Well, let me go back. I mean, one of the things we've noted before is how often nutrition is missing in the medical record, which, is to say nearly always. I mean, if I pulled 100 records, there might be 10 of them in there that have some nutritional history. So I would say, from my observation, by and large, we don't know what they're feeding. Now, so I would step back and say, well, I'll bet they're feeding the same thing sort of Americans feed their pets, right? Sort of more broadly. And so, maybe you want to pay attention to the things that are out there that might concern you, the raw diets, the goat's milk, and the 100 other sort of freaky things that people, and look, do you want to engage in a conversation with people about that? Probably not. I mean, obviously, there's some people that are off the deep end. You're not going to change their mind. And I think it's those few people that cause veterinarians the reluctance to approach it with the passion they should. There's, are you going to, are you going to bump into somebody that knows more about pet nutrition than you? Probably. and that's okay. I mean, I think it's, but compare you to the average pet owning consumer out there. I mean, you're infinitely more qualified. I mean, it's dangerous. You know what I need to avoid. And people don't. And it's by the way, when maybe you should spend some time seeing what people are paying for diets. I mean, there are a wealth of diets that are far more expensive than any filet mignon you've ever eaten. I mean, it'll change your opinion completely of what premium even is.
Right.
I mean, what's out there in the marketplace, and what some of these are top selling brands on places like Chewy. I mean, high selling brands. I mean, it's so I would argue we don't really know what people are feeding today, and if we were aware of that in all cases, I'm sure we would have an opinion, about certain things being more and less appropriate in our professional opinion. But I think it's just it's that reluctance to have a professional opinion.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, and this is just confidence, guys. You are well-trained, equipped, knowledgeable. This notion of, well, I'm not a board-certified veterinary nutritionist, therefore I can't make a diet recommendation. Please go tell that to the people at Chewy, Petco, PetSmart, your local pet food store, because they certainly don't let that stop them. So as we sort of get back to the solutions, you've mentioned multiple times these frictionless, automated, drop it at my doorstep solutions of pet food and preventives and so forth. Explain to us what companies like Hills and VetSource and others, how are they making this easy for veterinarians? Because I still think a lot of vets are going, you know what, Ernie, this sounds good and I really wish I could, but I don't have the time. I'm overwhelmed right now. I can barely keep my head above water. And now you're asking me to create an online store with subscriptions. Oh, Lord, no. So explain to them how much easier this has really gotten, especially the past few years.
Well, I think thank you for making that point, because the only people I ever talked to who are a little bit reluctant to go down this path of e-commerce are people that maybe had an unfortunate experience, and then when I ask them how long ago that was, invariably it was 5 years ago or 7 years ago, and I would say it's just like all other sort of e-commerce platforms. Everybody's trying to be more like Amazon, probably, in the sense that you want to be really frictionless, really easy to do business with, as few clicks as possible. And here's the good news. These things have, from your perspective, the user, these things are just off the shelf. Run down through them and click some boxes and away you go. I mean, it's relatively quick and simple and straightforward. I mean, you don't need an IT professional. You don't need to bring in any special consultants. I mean, I would. Here's how people typically go down this path. So if you haven't begun at all, and like I said earlier, very often pet nutrition is the logical first place to begin because of things like the bulky nature and the fast turn, and some of the other concerns about shrinkage or different things. So, and the weight of it and having to cart it around. So people often start with nutrition. And if you don't already have a relationship with an online pharmacy and home delivery, I think the simplest thing to do would be to go directly to Hills, for example, and they have a program called Hills to Home, which is just a very simple subscription process where it marries the pet, its size, number of pounds, let's say, to the feeding recommendations of the veterinarian and the particular product recommended, to know about how long that product's going to last and at what point, a reorder. This is what we call auto ship, when the next one will be automatically sent. And there's, a couple of ways of enrolling people in that. There are clinics that will sit down with people and walk them through the process right there. There's others where you send them a link and they enroll electronically. But I mean, it's gotten unbelievably simple. So for example, through Hills, you would decide which products you wanted to offer. Maybe you want to offer everything Hills offers. Maybe you want to limit it in some way. You also get to decide the selling price. And of course, this isn't done for free. They're shipping, and never free to ship heavy bags of food, but they make it. Here's the bottom line. I guess we should just cut to the chase. I mean, from my observation, and I think this is what I would tell clients, because I know my clients want me to be perfectly transparent. I would just say, if somebody says, how can you compete with Chewy? I would just say, it's very important to Hills that veterinarians are recommending their products. And that's why you can sell their product and compete with Chewy, because it's very important. can they service that business as cheaply as they could service a Chewy business? Probably not, because the volumes are so much smaller.
Right.
And any veterinarian is going to have thousands of potential customers. So a 3-doctor clinic might have tens of thousands of potential customers in a given geography, but only a small fraction of them will be enrolled in this. So it's not an inexpensive proposition. But companies like Hills and like the pharma companies, like the other pet food companies, like the lab companies, I mean, they have a real vested interest in veterinarians because you have that credibility. You have your recommendation carries huge weight, billions and billions of dollars of weight. And so they don't want you to abandon the nutrition business. They want you to be able to compete at some level. And if you're having trouble, talk to your rep, get coupons for your customers, whatever it takes. But you can actually, and I think you have to, if you are perceived as being not competitive with alternatives in the marketplace, then that casts dispersion on your credibility, trustworthiness, whether or not you got a clue as it relates to what's happening in the market. I mean, the last thing you want to do is misprice food or misprice other items in the pharmacy. You're guilty by association across the board. And then I think you do lose or stand the risk of losing the lifetime value of a client.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of our partners here at VerticalVet is VetCove. And, they've got this really great consumer pharmacy pricing tool where you can compare like what drugs are being charged for at Chewy or, pet 1-800-PET-MEDS and all that kind of stuff. So, again, that's why we partner with people like Hills and Vetco, VetSource, all these companies, because we know that they are actually benefiting us in our practice. So so Fritz, as we sort of end up today's conversation, is there anything else, again, I'm that young veterinarian out there. I'm that practice manager struggling around this topic. Is there any bit of advice you would say, look, you really want to make sure to focus on nutrition because what would you next say?
Because there's only a few things that probably impact pet health and longevity. And among those are genetics. This is taken from my old friend, Dr. Chuck Weiner. Genetics, environment, and nutrition. Those would be the three things that principally would determine a pet's health and longevity. And by the time they come to exist, there's probably not much we do about genetics at that point, although that game may be changing over time. And environment, I mean, your clients live where they live and the pet's, indoors or outdoors and lives how it lives. So you got limited leverage there. And I think nutrition is the string on your guitar that you have to play. And it can't be the most important thing to your client, which we know it is, and not also the most important thing to you. So, I mean, even if there wasn't a nickel to be made here, I would say you have an obligation to talk about it because it impacts health and longevity, and you have an obligation to talk about it and have an opinion because it's the most important thing to your pet owner, and just in the spirit of meeting and exceeding client expectations. But I would finally say, oh, by the way, there's huge money in it. I mean, it's and again, the beauty is, if I'm selling hundreds of thousands of dollars of Hills food over the internet and it gets home delivered, I don't have to buy that food, Dr. Ward.
Yeah.
So things like my cost of goods sold are going to go down. My cash flow is going to improve. It can't be stolen or go out of date or obsolete. I mean, there's 100 benefits. Most importantly, the pet, instead of getting one unit from me of the appropriate diet, hopefully we'll get dozens, but we know at least probably 10 or 12. So productivity just shoots through the roof. So compliance, and here's, I guess, the final salvo is what we know perfectly to be true is that we're well acquainted with failure today, that what we're now doing is extraordinarily miserable in terms of pet nutrition. I mean, we can't do much worse than we're doing now. And and if there's 1,000 clinics out there, there's a few exceptions. I apologize, but as a profession, we're not in the pet food business, and there's billions of dollars out there. There's 100 million pet owners that need your opinion. And today it's the best time ever to compete. I mean, all these obstacles that existed historically are obsolete today.
Wow. I got to tell you, that's a masterclass. So rewind the tape, go watch that again. Those are all very salient, very practical bits of advice for why you should be focusing on nutrition. And Fritz, what I really admire and respect about you so much is, even though, I mean, you're not a veterinarian, you come from the world of finance and accounting and all that. That's how I first, came to know you as well. And yet you've always seen right through, said, hey guys, how does this benefit the pet? Like, are you making them healthier? Is this helping them out? Because that's really, even though you come from the world of finance and economics, you really, I think, distilled it down to the most important imperative for us as veterinary professionals. That is this the best thing for the pet? And you've made a brilliant case once again.
Well, I appreciate that. It's one of those rare, maybe not rare, but it's one of those beautiful areas where the pet wins, the client wins, and the practice wins. I mean, it's one of those deals where, and companies like Hills win. I mean, it's one of those deals where everyone does better. And I would remind that, just kind of as a going away piece here, nutrition is the fifth vital assessment. Right. And, ideally there's a specific pet food recommendation made every pet, every time. That's kind of the gold standard that I think, we should hold ourselves to. I think clients want that. That's the most important thing.
Well, you certainly help us reach these gold standards, and at VerticalVet, we are committed to helping your clinic reach those gold standards as well. So if you want to find out more about Hills at Home, definitely you can contact them directly, or you can come directly to us at VerticalVet, talk to one of our reps, and we'd be happy to point you in the right direction, get you set up, show you how to set up a online store. I mean, we've got lots of partners that do just that. Fritz, again, thank you so much for sharing your time with us tonight, and really, I mean, just bang up advice. I love talking to you every time.
Well, I appreciate you, and thank you for making it easy on me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, listen, VerticalVet family, once again, just a great conversation. Fritz Wood, check him out. Check out Hills at Home. Check out VerticalVet. All we're here to do is to help you achieve success. And so whether that's measured in the amount of revenue that your clinic generates, whether that's the number of pets that you see, or how many people you just make happy, we are here to support you in that. So if you want to find out more, if you're not already a member, go to verticalvet.com. Let us help you, because that's what we're here for. Again, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much to Hills for sponsoring Fritz Wood tonight. I hope this has helped you. If it has, let us know. If you have questions, let us know. But on behalf of the entire team at VerticalVet, I'm Dr. Ernie Ward, Executive Director of Education. It's been just so much fun talking to you tonight. Stay safe. Talk to you soon. Bye.